Maybe they were big back then. I just didn't notice it. They feel really big. Now I'm down to extra
Are
large.
you gonna cook? You getting the chicken? Cooking chicken?
No, I didn't even get the chicken because I was thinking of the time, so I was like, I'll probably stop at McDonald's and wait till after the talk. I don't eat that much. Good to see you, Barry. I think about you all the time when I bring up, when we meet, when we talk about certain things. Actually, I'm learning through the experience I went through to be more expressive, to show other people your love and care. 'Cause I'm more of a quiet type. Like when I came over here, it was just funny to me, but I'm gonna share with Glenn. So I came over after Glenn lost his daughter, but I didn't really like express a lot. You know, I told him, I'm sorry I was lost with him, but I kind of listened. I was doing a lot of talking, and then he sends me a text. It was funny to me, like, I'm fine. You welcome. But I know Glenn's personality, so it didn't surprise me or whatever. But I know I'm more of a I think good thoughts, but I don't ever have to all the time express it. So you can't really tell. But in my mind, I'm like sad for you, or hurt for you, or grieved for you, or I need to, maybe express more, show action. But that's not naturally the way my personality works.
Well, I know, and everybody's different. I'm always amazed that, like, if I see somebody getting emotional, like on TV, or anywhere, like if somebody's getting emotional about something in their life or whatever, tears come to my face. And so, like a journalist can stand there, I'm so sorry, I can't believe that journalist is not experiencing the same emotions I am. It's like somebody's pouring out their soul or, whatever.
Right.
But everybody's different in how they,
It's interesting you bring that up because actually I had thought about that. I'm always thinking all the time and everything. And I was actually thinking that one time it was something with the whole Trump issue, right? And one of the Gold Star, I don't know if you heard, the Gold Star members, there's supposedly some high-risk rescue team. But anyway,
oh yeah,
this lady was like really bereaved, and I was sad for her too. And I was just like, well,
was it her son or something?
It was her son. Her and the lady and her husband was there. He was coping every day. He was really hurting. And the liberal anchor basically was saying, she was trying to get into the whole Trump thing and why Trump didn't call or how he talked to her or something. And she was just hurt. And the news reporter just didn't seem to show, like, I would have been at least hurt by it, or like, wow, this lady, she was just real straight-faced kid. So I was thinking what she was thinking. I was like, I don't get that, but they may also train them to be that way. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I know that you're supposed to be, journalists are not supposed to show their emotions, to remain objective, and not, but, I mean, humans are humans, and I'm not talking about just journalists, but even just like, you can be in a room and, like at work, and somebody, we heard this, what's that expression, curdling, when somebody is crying, and it's piercing to cry. Is it curdling? Anyway, there's a word like that. And one of our co-workers had just found out that her brother committed suicide. And she fell to the floor. And like that piercing, like you knew something serious had happened. And, just how different people react. Just like, it's
I agree, and
but I'm not saying that
You don't have to, but just check it.
it doesn't mean that you're
hello, Liz. That's Liz, huh? Hello, Liz.
Hi, how you doing?
All right. You been doing better?
A little better today, yeah.
A little better today? That's good to hear.
yeah.
figured that's what Glenn was doing. It's all. But yeah, she's online. Yeah. No, he does that because we were expressing certain types of things.
Hello?
So he's letting us in. He does that all the time, so I'm used to it.
I let anybody join in.
Right. We were just talking about emotions, Liz.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I was being pretty vague. That's pretty vague.
Ago, you know, he had on the phone, you know, discussing the secret, and you know, like we were discussing like when you're suffering, and why does God allow that, and you're following Him and all of that, and you know, which is always hard to explain that to someone, you know, you're experiencing that, but not that I want to suffer, whatever, but I find that having done that, I grow from that more than I ever would have had I not experienced that. And, you know, if I have to suffer, at least that hopefully that suffering will end, and then, you know, you will realize, oh my gosh, you know, just what you've learned and what you appreciate or understand, you know, from the suffering or the problems or that you're experiencing.
I agree. Yeah, I actually embrace what I learned from it. I don't like it when I'm going through it, you know, but I knew when I went, I knew the Lord was trying to teach me something or get me to see something clear. And I'm glad I went through it this summer, even though when I was in it, I was like, Harry, get me out of here.
True.
I didn't like it at all. Like, when is this going to end? Like, usually when it's a suffering or grief, I had a tendency to cope well with it because I know it's going to be short term. But when it's like what Glenn went through or Liz, some of those suffer for long, when you don't know when it's going to end, that's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different, because you can't see the end, you can't see the finish line. So but it forces you to.
Well, I mean, but your mind. I mean, you know, and I've experienced that when you think it's not going to end. The turmoil, or, you know, for me it was depression.
Right.
And you think like, am I going to be feeling this way forever? And, you know, the mind, I mean, how it makes you, I mean, it's hard to be objective and realistic and calm, you know, in your mind about what you're experiencing, because it sends you off that, you know, just a different way of looking at your situation and experiencing whatever it is you're experiencing.
Yeah, your mind's in a state that's it's hard to put into words, but I remember some of the things that helped me. I remember Glenn sharing, I think about Elizabeth Elliot helping some lady in depression, and she was like, just focus on the toothbrush, you know, she said, all I can do is brush my teeth, she said, focus on that. When I heard Glenn talk express about, I was like, what do you do when you just sick all day? And he would explain to me over the years. So when I went through it, as tough as it was, I kind of had a heads up to kind of know what to do. But it amazes me how it forces your mind to be consumed with asking God for relief or help or seeking Him. You just can't get out of it, because anything less than that is just too unbearable. So that was real unique. It's like, and I knew coming out of it, it was like, I was thinking to myself, like, how do you keep up with that kind of seeking of God mentality when that's all you have? I guess I've got to the point where it's almost, can't do it without suffering almost. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, as horrific as it is, it does keep your mind constantly looking at God. Like, my mind was just consumed with, it just felt like it was non-stop. God, what do I do? What do I think? You know, I'm feeling this way, like all day long. But when you get out of it, you have relief. You just kind of go back to breathing or whatever. And you ask yourself, I know I ask myself, it's kind of like, I know that's what the Lord wants ultimately, is the continual communion and fellowship with Him.
But
I don't know how to.
You're experiencing difficult times emotionally. Whether it's stress or tension or depression.
Right.
It's hard to have that connection with God as you would normally have when things are going well, or you feel like you can think clearly and you can take the time to have this relationship with God. It's hard when you're in that moment.
Don't get me wrong. When I say what I said, I don't want to come across as if it was some beautiful fellowship with the Lord. It wasn't. I'm just saying it forced me to constantly keep looking at Him, because my mind's so everywhere, emotions changing all the time. Simple things that we can do now I couldn't do. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's just an experience that you gotta experience it to know what I'm talking about. It's just, yeah, you can't even. A lot of times, like Glenn said, I remember when I said when I got sick that one time, I couldn't really even think about God. I couldn't think of any verses. It just was nothing. I don't know how to explain it. No verse. I was like, it was like I'm consumed with emotion, consumed with grief.
It's like if a knife is in your stomach, you just can't help but be thinking about that. It's like, I got to get it out. I can't think of, God help me, but that's about it, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But I did have like a comfortable from. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Where parent is saying is true. It's a catch-22. It's just, I don't know how to put it, where you can't really worship Him like you may want and should have continually, but then what Steve's saying is you're forced to just, constantly say help, 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 and that's keeping you looking to Him, and that's a good thing, but you can't get deep into it in many ways. You need to get out. You need health, especially for health sickness or deep depression, emotion. On the other hand, I was still able to, because I'm so miserable and you want deliverance, is like I was able to study a little and get into, let's say, because I need God so much to do something. And as Caesar phrased it years ago, you're still able to get, maybe you can't study like you want to when you're healthy and get real deep with Him. On the other hand, you find some jewels, as Caesar says. There's some kind of jewel you discover in studying something, like a couple of articles I looked at really deeply this summer, whatever, to kind of get me through. And there was such treasures in there, that really, I think, like what y'all were talking about is like when y'all were talking, it's like we're talking about suffering and things like that. For the first, 20 years of my Christian walk, I didn't teach a lot on that or whatever like that, because it wasn't, when you're young, you got health and nothing bothers, you have some problems, but it's like the Psalms didn't mean much to me at all, really. But it's like, I really see a lot in the Psalms now, but before, that was just not a book that appealed to me. It's like, I don't know what he's saying,
It's interesting you mention that, like when I watched the Astros game, all the older players were crying, the young players wasn't.
Isn't that interesting?
But they know what it's like to struggle and not. The young players, they don't really get it. They've never struggled. It's like they're champions in 2 years. But I thought that was very unique. All of them, they were like McCann and Beltran. I remember those when they were younger. They were like really boo-hooing. They know what it's like to, to go through that. And just with suffering, I was going to say, the simplest of things, you know, just triggered in my mind when I suffer. Like, I remember Glenn sharing, you know, the song verse about a dry, weary land. He was explaining how, for us, we don't understand what it's like not to have water. So when he was teaching that, I tried to force my mind to get into their mindset. What is it like if you just didn't have water? So we have water everywhere. It's like, water, yeah, I'm thirsty, but it's nothing like not having it.
Well, try something like this, which is that, you know, you can experience that. Try to go a day without drinking water. And then when you get to that point where you can't even concentrate because the need for water takes over. And you, I mean, it starts to, you know, of course, physically affect you.
Right.
It's just like your whole focus is that I need water so desperately. You can't think otherwise. So it's like, it amazes me that they could even think or talk spiritually when, you know, you have this physical need.
Maybe you aren't able to get details, a bunch of thoughts, but yet just the thought of God and begging Him is coming out. Esther, they prayed, didn't they? That they didn't drink water for a while too, right?
They fasted for. She said, before I go summon the king, I want everybody to fast for 3 days, and on the 4th day, I'm gonna go talk to her.
Didn't some of it include no water?
I think they said. I'm not sure. I gotta go back and look.
What's that?
Esther said, and neither eat nor drink while they fasted.
Well, I'm just thinking, right, what Perry said is like, maybe that, again, like you're talking about when you're suffering or when it's you get a passion to ask for God's help. He likes a passion. Maybe you can't get into detail of all kind of stuff, but there's that passionate hunger, help me. And I'm thinking like, I'm not saying don't go without water, because that's just, you know, that thing where you would do something in terms of fasting where it forces even your body to crave God and to cry out for God. You know, should we do that, certain things like that in life to force ourselves? Because it's so hard when you're not suffering. Is almost, again, don't force suffering, but yet certain things should we try to do to develop a passion, you know, deny the body fasting of whatever, chocolate or whatever, you know, it doesn't have to be a full something else, you know, whatever.
It's funny you say that, because I was thinking of that when I was trying to connect it to fasting. Like, why do you fast? You know, you're depriving yourself in order to create a stronger desire for something else. Well, for God or whatever. The focus, it forces you. That's what I was kind of thinking. Kind of like when the psalmist, you know, David running for safety, you know, he has no one to go to. It's like, what do I do? He says he writes the greatest songs, you know. He doesn't have anything, he has nowhere to go to. And what's interesting is, like, it's funny, like when Glenn said it's just simple things. You know, sometimes when I was going through suffering, the simplest of things meant the most to me. Like, I'm suffering, I go to my mom's hospital, well, how are you doing? That just meant everything. Like, that's crazy. That never meant that much to me when everything's going wrong. But just, how you doing? Hey, you sure you okay? Just that little bitty thing. Or talking to my daughter, Daddy, I'll listen to you. Just put you in tears, you know. Simple things, you know. Because you're so in want, you know, of something. Or when you're suffering, God gives you a little bit of daylight.
Yeah.
You know, I always thought about, you know, one of the things that just consumed my mind when Lynn told me about Brianna not sleeping for like 11 days, and finally she got some sleep, and she like breaks out like in a doxology. Well, anyway, what that is just praising God for that little bit. And I try to force my mind to go there. I think a lot of times we as Christians, we really don't do that. We just kind of gloss over things. But I don't know what I read one time, a commentary was talking about meditating on word, what that really means, the Hebrew word means, really nod, bite at the bone or something. Going in detail of what that is, but that's what suffering makes you do. But yeah, but I understand what you're saying. Like, it gets so difficult, you don't really know where to go. It's like, that's a different type. But
yeah, and like you said, it's like there's different ways of reaching out to God. Like you said, the passion. Like when when I was at my worst, if I'm at my worst, it's hard to dwell on the word.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that it's like you are crying to God. It's like, relieve me, please God. You know, I never like questioned Him or my faith in Him because of whatever suffering I was asking for relief, but I couldn't just in the worst moment of whatever I was, you know, like the depression I was experiencing, I couldn't just turn to the Word and spend time in it. It's like my mind, it was just like I was so down. I would read it and reread it and reread it, and it would go nowhere. But I did have the passion there, and that I know you're there and you're going to get me through this, and I'm just asking for relief. You know, that's all that I could do as far as reach out to Him. But as far as to dwell on His Word and be, you know, calm, and I couldn't do it. I mean, it was just like, there was no way, every time I'd open the book, you know, except for maybe just certain verses, you know, you can do all things through Him, you know, just, you know, like, you could focus on those short verses, you know, but as far as to really...
And it's like this, you know, the examples are so good, like marriage, you know, where a wife wants a husband, we kind of talked about this the other night with Anna and stuff, a wife wants a husband to come and do things for her and all these type of things, but let's say he's really, really sick and he can't do those things. I mean, God wants to restore us to be able to do all the things to help serve Him or serve the wife, typically. But at that moment, if he's really sick for a couple of weeks in bed, but he just has a passion. He can't do anything for the wife, but he has a great passion to just want her to be by his side and everything like that. Would she not love that? Would not most women just love that you just have a passion? You can't do anything for me, but I see that you just want me to be with you when you're sick or something like that. She would love that, you know. Maybe that's what God is looking. He loves seeing you got a passion. Don't worry about all the things you need to do. We'll take care of that later when I heal you. But I'm just loving that you're having a passion to want me to think of me and be with me all the time, you know.
Yeah. I always think of John 17:3. That verse used to always stick out to me. He said, "This is eternal life, to know me, you know, the Father and the Son." It's like, what? You know, all the time, you know, you're learning. It's about obtaining heaven and this and that. It's just knowing me, and like Glenn was saying, you know, Spirit, you just want that intimacy. Bear just simple things, not all this. I need to know how to witness to this person or these ins and outs. Just, you know, the comfort of just Him comforting you or being there with you. You know, even if someone can't comfort you, can't relieve you, just the fact that they're there.
Well, like you said, with your mom or with your daughter, when things are going well, and you always expect them to be there, and they're going to say, you know, like greet you. But when you're feeling down, and you know, and you need just some consoling, somebody for some reason at that moment now, you're aware that they're saying, "How's it going?" And it just catches you because it's like you hadn't really thought about it before. Because you know, it's like, you know, everybody says, "How's it going?" or your daughter says, "I can be there for you." But when you're feeling down, and that person all of a sudden reaches out, it's like, it is a relief, and it does feel good that, you know, they're taking an interest in you when you're feeling down at that moment. And
it's deep. I think I would cry about little stuff like that. Just a little, it was unique experience.
Want to share anything, Liz? You don't have to.
Well, the thing is, you know, even when He allows suffering, we have to realize that what He says in His Word, that all things work together for good, that, you know, we have to hold on to that hope. Like even Joseph, you know, he told his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God, what did He do? He intended it for good, so that many more lives could be saved." Sometimes we need to just, you know, hold on to those things, because that's what gives us hope. Like Psalm 34, you know, that's one of my favorite psalms. And what does he say in Psalm 34? He's always talking about, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivereth him out of them all. In other words, we're gonna see good come out of all of it. We have to hold on to that, because he's promised that he's gonna deliver us out of all of that. In fact, that's actually in Psalm 34 is one of the verses that he focused on in a couple of texts about a year ago, where the eyes of the Lord are upon the righteous, and his ears open to their cry. I don't even know if you remember, but I do. From the old text, that he's focused on us, and he wants to help us. And, sometimes we don't remember that in the midst of the suffering. But then when it's over, we can see, because Joseph didn't know what was coming in the midst of his suffering. But then after, he could see how the Lord turned it for good. And that's the promise for us today. I don't believe that all of it. Some people believe that, everything is coming from God. I believe God allows things for a reason and for a purpose, but I don't think everything, even that, comes from God. There's a difference of coming from Him and allowing it, because in the case of Job, for example, those bad things didn't come from God. He just allowed it. But it was for greater good.
Right.
And like y'all say, as I've always shared, it's like, we talked about it Tuesday, but when you're in agony, there's really nothing anybody can do to help you. I mean, you just want God to get you out of the agony. The only thing I can offer you is that that I know what you're feeling. I just think there's something really special in that, of knowing that or whatever like that. And it's like you may not learn those things till after the fact of, not that, like, I think all of you people, Liz, Steve, Perry, all of y'all are great, caring, compassionate people that I see or whatever like that. But I know after what Perry went through, honestly, later, I felt more from him because I felt like he knew more about suffering. I felt more, I don't know how to put it, understanding, sensitivity or something like that towards me. I've seen it, with Steve and when he got sick that time, and then when he's talked about this summer. It's like a special club, that bonds you, and that helps that you're not alone. That's all we can kind of offer people who are suffering. Like I said, somebody loses a child. There's nothing I can't be preaching to them or something like that. But another lady who's lost a child is going to mean everything to that lady. That's all. That's one of my great experiences of Mom. Was just like when she walked into Miss Lieber, they were all laughing, and she just started crying. Mom was like, "That's not her son," but she was crying more than Miss Lieber and everything like that when Richard got killed or whatever like that. While everybody else, is just like Mom. I think Mom was thinking like, what would it be like if she lost us? It made her think, and that drew compassion to offer Mrs. Lieber, which was a beautiful thing that nobody else could offer,
Oh, for sure.
Sure.
Amen, amen. Oh, we're dropping Liz.
He dropped me.
Which is something that if you have to experience the suffering, nobody likes to suffer, but yet if you have to experience the suffering, then that good can come out of it, and that you can be there for somebody in need because you've experienced that and you know what it's like to be in agony, to be in pain, to be suffering, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, it's suffering. And so you can relate to it. And it's like, I think of, like when you were talking about the baseball players, the older ones. I mean, like when I was teaching, there were some whiz kids, that I say, oh, they have a lot of potential, you know. But it is just right now just that potential. Because the one thing that you can teach somebody, and that's wisdom. You only get wisdom with age, and that now that, you know, we can talk and we know what those older players are going through. I mean, all, you know, they've got gained a wisdom about what this means. You know, the beauty of winning a championship and the years that they've struggled and worked hard. And the younger ones are like, wow, you know, it's like they don't understand what it means. They think like, okay, we won, and they think it's going to happen again. It's not until they get older that they're going to realize the essence of what it means to.
Absolutely. It makes you realize, like, even from sports I've learned, it's not so much the accomplishment, it's what kind of like you went through or what the Lord was teaching you that's more profound. I remember Pat Riley, I think he had one with the New York Heat, and he said, I hate to say it, you know, and the Laker days were like the glory days, he says, but this one is better than all the Lakers ones. And that may have hurt a lot of Laker, you know, nation, but he was trying to say, you know, just what I had to go through and accomplish and all the things I went through, this one is so much sweeter.
Yeah.
And maybe the Lord understands that for us. Maybe we get in a special club in heaven where we get a sweeter understanding and arrival, you know, to have suffered in this world, in this life, that we're going to be able to sense or appreciate heaven more. I don't know. That'll be beautiful. Yeah, I can see it in this life, you know, now through suffering and stuff, I just feel like I'm way more appreciative of God for the little things. You know, a lot of things that I just took for granted, you know, even when God gives you gifts of understanding of certain aspects of Scripture, when you don't have that anymore, all you have is Him, you ultimately realize it's really all Him, you know, only because of Him, you even understand and have these things, you know. I know through my suffering, I mean, I appreciate, you know, I was thinking today on campus, or this week on campus, just, it's so many that God just didn't, the Holy Spirit just didn't quicken them to know that they're sinful and they need Jesus. I knew that all along, but when I go through suffering, I got a glimpse of what suffering is like and a glimpse of how harsh the world can be, so to speak. It's all the more sweeter what God has done for me, that I'm saved. But, you know, you can't really see that, I don't know how to say, appreciation until you kind of actually go through things, you know. You know, I don't know how to explain it, but like even when you see in his history of how certain areas got saved, there's ones that really went through a lot of turmoil, a lot of problems. Whereas the ones that are easy going, they don't, you know, they don't know or understand. I don't know, but it's, yeah. That's interesting. You just bring it up,
I mean,
2 Corinthians 1.
There is, to me, a lot to be gained, whether it's maturity, understanding, compassion. I mean, like, there's nobody more effective as a speaker, like, than somebody who's been through it. So, like that John Walsh that does the America Wanted, America Most Wanted.
His daughter.
His son.
Oh, it was his son.
It was his son who was kidnapped and killed. And, you know, like, when he is there to help those, I mean, there's nobody who, you know, like, knows it like, you know, he does, and what a family goes through in having a child disappear and not knowing what happened to them, you know, which he went through for years, not knowing. Or, like, you know, when you have somebody, a former drug addict, who gets up in front of a school and tries to share with children, you know, don't get involved in drugs. What they've been through, I mean, you know, like, nobody is more effective than somebody who has suffered and had gone through that. You know, I remember there was this one guy who got drunk and killed his best friend, you know, because he got behind the wheel of the car and his friend tried to stop him. And now he's spends his life going and speaking to students in schools about, you know, and about not drinking and driving and all that. And, you know, it's just like he, you know, is a living example of, you know, and it's only through his own suffering of what he went through that he's able to reach out. So there's a lot to be gained in what you can share with others, like, you know, what I've experienced or what he's experienced or you experienced. Now you can appreciate and share with others and be there, you know, as a witness or even just as a compassionate friend, you know, to get somebody through it, or hurdle.
We become more bold. Certain things produce a boldness in us. We don't care anymore about what other people think. It's like, I know this is true.
That's true.
I'm ready to speak it or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost like the last. It's like we're all trying to be conformed to the image of Christ. It's like, to me, that's like the toughest hurdle, is the suffering, to be like Christ. You know, like in 2 Corinthians 1, hopefully I got it right, with the comfort of when Paul says God allows you to, you know, suffer so you can comfort those who later on, with the comfort that God gave you. Like you were saying, just thinking about God wants his people to be able to comfort people, and he recognizes the only way they're going to be able to do that is they have to suffer. They'll never be able to comfort them in this life the way I want them to be comforted unless, you know, someone else has to, in a sense, go through an experience, because they can't just get it from reading or just seeing it on a piece of paper. It's one of those things that you only can get the, you know, the fruit of the Spirit through suffering, that particular fruit. Or you think about the parallel, you know, I always think about that, you know, those who are forgiven much love much. It's the same thing with the drug addict or John Walsh. It's like God produces something through that, something that only can be obtained through that. This passion for people, or passion to save souls, or and God knows that, so maybe it's just not just a matter of teaching, you know. That's why we used to talk about Glenn. Yeah, you need to be taught, but then it's also a uniqueness in actually doing. When you're actually serving God, that can produce an understanding that if you never serve, you can never understand. Same way with suffering, there's a certain understanding or compassion that you can have that you can't ever get that fully until you go through it, unless God gifts you with it. Which is, I used to ask Glenn that all the time. Remember, I used to ask you about, what is this with Paul? He says, I want you to know the fellowship of my suffering. I never could understand that. But now I got a glimpse of it. You know, for years I couldn't. Why does he have to suffer? What is Jesus trying to get him to see? I never could understand that for a decade, you know, a long time. Now I'm starting to get a glimpse of what he's talking about.
You remind me, you said that, you're talking about John Walsh is another area, is like, I can teach material about forgiveness, you know, but John Walsh could get up or somebody and say, I want to tell you about forgiveness to a parent who's had its child killed, and he can do it with a compassion and conviction or something like that.
That you could never.
Right.
Yeah.
And people would really understand.
Like the Jewish girl too, remember?
Because it would be so painful. It's like, well, Glenn, you just don't understand. But it's like, well, John Walsh, you understand, so I'm going to listen to you more, in a sense.
Like the Jewish lady, I can't think of it, not the Jewish lady, the clockmaker family.
Corey ten Boom?
Yeah, I remember when I kind of first heard about Corey ten Boom after the war, one of the guys that actually abused the Jews, she was trying to shake his hand or something. Glenn probably could tell it better. And she was like, at that moment, she realized how difficult it was to forgive what she forgave him. And I remember thinking, like, initially my thought was like, forgiveness is not that hard, you know. It's not on certain levels, but I began to take my mind to her, like, Steve, what are you in her position to see these atrocities that we can't, Americans can't fathom, that you're actually seeing them going on, and this guy supposedly changes his mind, and you're thinking, and God's saying forgive him. That's a whole other ball game.
It really is. I mean, think about, like, if somebody were to have raped and killed one of your daughters.
Right, yeah.
And then, and you know they did it, and they've been convicted, and for you to be able to say, I forgive you. You know, I mean, to really forgive what, you know, like, that's...
I used to say, honestly, sir, I used to say that I could do it, but now, when I went through suffering, I question myself. I don't know. You know, I don't know how to respond. Exactly. But I used to be confident, like, oh yeah, God's forgiven me, I can forgive anybody. But I've noticed, like, I'll examine myself with certain things people have done to me, and I ask myself, have you really forgiven them? Like, what? And I'll challenge myself, what levels do you kind of think about them when you see them? Like, what emotions come up? Like, are you thinking about how they did you when that happened? Do you treat them a little differently? You used to offer them 3 times. Why don't you only offer them 1 time now? Make you examine, like, have you really forgiven? Now, of course, there's difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, but when I started to think about that, it's not, you know, you begin to realize, you know, you really need God to forgive, and it's a whole other ball game when God increases the, you know, the intensity of what He's trying to teach you. Because when I suffered that one time, I never thought I could get to a point where I couldn't think about God, and that scared me. I got to a point where I literally could not grasp Scripture. It just, nothing was, it just, like Glenn would say, you're just so consumed about the knife, you cannot focus. What you think you know to be true, God can put you in a situation like, are you sure that's true? Do you really think I can get you out of this? Are you really confident that I'm there for you? Like you said, I know what you meant by not questioning God, but I questioned God when I was suffering. I mean, not in a bad way, because I know I've seen a lot of examples, but I did question, like, you know, like started to really question, like, why, or what did I do? Let me examine, did I do something wrong? Just run the gamut of that. God, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you going to say, Liz?
I said that's also being human. That's not something where you should be, you know, many times I think Christians are too hard on themselves. You know, even when, and sometimes we think that feeling pain when we remember something, sometimes we think that we haven't forgiven. And we've got to remember that forgiveness itself is an act of faith. So you forgive someone on faith whether you feel it or not.
Right.
And you just keep praying for that person, and eventually, you know, there comes a time where you can remember without the pain, and you just, and I've also experienced it, that the more you pray for that person, even if you don't want to, believe me, there's times when I prayed, and Lord, I don't want to pray for this person, but I want you to bless them and keep them and save them anyway. Because you're doing it as an act of faith. You know, even if you don't feel like you have forgiven somebody, just say it out loud, release it to the Lord, and that's it. And because I remember my mom telling me about this fellow who was a missionary over in China somewhere, and this other young fellow, murdered his only son. And later the fellow not only led that murderer to the Lord, but he wound up adopting him. And to me, that was something that even today I have a hard time even beginning to fathom. How close that man's walk with the Lord must have been, and how much that must have hurt, but the Lord brought him to that place where he could not only just forgive him, but tell him about the Lord. The man accepts Christ, and then he winds up adopting him. Like, now he's his son. And what a beautiful analogy that what Christ did for us.
Right.
You know, so, you know, even because, you know, sometimes when you're suffering in the midst of whatever, you don't even remember one Bible verse. You just, sometimes I tell people, even if you can't remember one thing to say, just say, I see Jesus, and he knows the rest, because he knows what's in your heart. So, you know, that's another thing I think, that many times Christians need to not be so hard on themselves, say, Lord, I forgive them on faith, and the Lord will handle the rest. And it might not be overnight, and most of the time, it's not overnight. You know, even Paul, when he was writing about that jailer who was so horrible to him and caused him many hurts, and he said, you know, the Lord repay him, you know, what he's done. That fellow must have been some horror for Paul to have written that. So, you know, but like I said, forgiveness is an act of faith.
Amen. Amen. What Steve was saying a few minutes ago is, on the one hand, you know, on the one hand, there's times, of course, just in everyday life where we claim the Word, and like Liz is saying, you just have faith on what the Word says, whether you feel it or not, like the area of forgiveness or whatever. As I shared with somebody I counseled about a year ago, it's like they were struggling later. I don't know, I'm throwing this in. It's like they had forgiven, but then they were struggling. I says, well, here's something I learned a long time ago. There's the once and for all cross, but then there's the daily cross that comes along, you know. It's like, you may have really forgiven, I believe you did, but that doesn't mean a month later Satan's not going to jump on your back and says, remember what they did to you? Think about it. You know, you can lose it again, so to speak, and you've got to take up the daily cross. But anyway, what Steve was sharing or something like that, of just when you got so sick, let's say, where you couldn't think of God. Typically in our counseling, it's like, hey, you know, you need to do this to deal with depression, and you need to do this with your suffering. You know, 90-95% of the time, you need to claim the Word or whatever. But as I was telling Steve, there's a time in people's lives where you can get in a physical, even, or emotional, spiritual coma. And if a person was in a coma, you can't tell them, claim the Word of God, you know, whatever. And that's what I think of, like Paula right now. She's so sick, so many things, that she's in a coma. And it's like, she needs us to deliver her, maybe out of prayer or something like that. But, you know, what Steve was sharing was like when he was so sick is, maybe there's a time in our life, you know, typically you do the normal things, but there's a time that God will bring us to where He wants you to say and learn, you can't do anything. You can't even claim the Word. I can bring you to such despair that you're just begging for help or something like that. But my scripture would be, what you just quoted was, here's the Apostle Paul, so great, yet he gets to a point where he despairs of life, and he says, as you help me by your prayers, or something like that. He seems like he's in such a coma state that he couldn't even handle life or something like that. And I don't think it's wrong that God brings us to that point to sometimes show us in the ultimate end, even all that you think you can claim you can do, I can bring you to such despair that you can't do it, and you just are begging for me and in need of me, you know, whatever. So, you know, I don't have the balance of all of that.
That's a scary place. When you're going through it, though. So true. Yeah, I always think of that despair of life where he said, we just thought the sentence of death was on him. I mean, Paul was saying, I was pretty certain it was over. But he said, because you pray. And maybe that's the key. And I remember I know Glenn, you've been bringing that up a lot. And, you know, I think about that, you know, I need to actually set some time in stone where you really condition yourself for that type of prayer, you know. Because you're not used to praying like that. Usually we pray on need-based kind of thing. Oh, this person needs, you know, whatever. You can kind of pray on the spot. But they constantly intercede, and you don't know if God's going to deliver them or not. I always like the Revelation verse we said something like in heaven they had a bag full of all the prayers of the saints. Remember that one? It's kind of like I just thought that was unique. I still don't fully understand that one. It's like and he had a whole bag of the prayers of the saints. Like, well, what was that trying to say? But and really, really that's the point. Like Glenn was saying, I thought about that a lot because you mentioned it a lot about sometimes really ultimately you need the comfort of somebody that can empathize with you that actually been through it. Is that the whole point? Is the whole point, one of the points is God is trying to get you a point where it's really nothing you can do. You just got to keep asking for help. But on the flip side, the person who can identify with you, they have to empathize you while everybody is praying. All these things need to be going on in a sense simultaneously. Because the person suffering, you can't. I remember I couldn't even drink water without concentrating. I had to actually concentrate, holding the cup, tilting the cup, watching the water go in my mouth without spilling. I mean, I never think about that, but when you have to focus every little step, like every step, all right, I got to grab it. Do I really have it? Lord, do I really have it? Is the water really there? And you bring it into your mouth. I don't want to spill it because if I drop it, I don't have the strength to pick it back up again. That's just a whole nother. Like if I miss this, if I miss my mouth, like first you got to find the mouth. If I miss it, I don't get to drink for a long time. You got to ask God every single time. And sometimes I tell Glenn when I'm fixing something on my car. I remember one time I got kind of emotional, but I think God was trying to teach me something. I'm like going through all the steps, rationing, but I think God was trying to say, you need me, and I didn't want to acknowledge Him. And I was like, okay, God, is that what you really want? You want me to acknowledge that I have to actually need you to focus on the ratchet just to get, and He was like, yes. And it's like a peace came over me, and I was rested like it was nothing, and it came off. But it was like He was trying to get me to see, all this stuff, you have all these manuals and all this, but I'm going to show you sometimes in life, you need me to grab the ratchet, put it on there right, go to the right place, and you got to be focused on me the whole time, or you're not going to get it. And not only that, you got to acknowledge that you need me. I mean, like, wow, It's...
Amen.
Yeah.
Where we learn M by M, D by D, S by S, moment by moment, day by day, second by second.
It's only by the grace of God that He allows us to have some kind of, quote, self-sufficiency that we're able to talk. I mean, it's really His grace allowing us to do that. I mean, that's profound.
Well, just the fact that we're here today, at this moment, at this point in time. I mean, Glenn has been having health issues going back to 2001. And here it is, 2017, and he is here today. I mean, it's like, and the same for me and for you, whatever we've experienced, we have gone through it, and we have made it.
God's grace is sufficient. I mean, it also shows. I know for me, it really revealed. How much probably more we're gonna learn in glory. Because in a sense, we don't really like being totally dependent on God. When you really think about it, because in a certain moment, that's where you're at. I mean, of course, aside from the suffering from physical ailments or the feeling, yeah, but the feeling ultimately produces, you have nothing to hold on but depend on Him. It's scary. It's not outside from the suffering, it should be a beautiful thing to totally depend on God, but it's not usually.
You remind me of one of my favorite articles. A statement in there is, don't get me wrong, we need to say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Right.
We need to claim the truth. But then there's another aspect of where God will bring us to something in Charles Stanley's article, Brokenness. He says, God is ultimately after the one thing we don't want to do. God is ultimately after the control of our lives. And that's the last thing we want to do, is give control to anybody, even God. And only in these moments of suffering do you kind of learn truly what it means to give. You can't even do what you think you can. I can eat and drink to the glory of God. No, you can't. If it ain't for me, you can't do it. Let me show you how dependent you are on me or whatever. You need to go to your whatever thing, Stevie. Go ahead and go.
Yeah, I was watching. We was talking. I just ain't that up.
Go ahead.
One thing I didn't feel like driving. When I was watching on the video, I just wanted to see him. Hopefully I can witness to him.